Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Hello if you're new here. Today is going to be my labour birth story, as you can tell from the title. I've got baby brain, so apologies if I'm talking a bit slow. Also, I'd like to mention, yes, my hair needs washing. It also really needs dyeing as well. But I've got a wedding to go to in a few weeks' time, so I'm trying to hold off on the hair dye for a few more weeks. Just so that it looks alright for the wedding. I do also want to point out, I'm aware that you will probably feel like you're on a slant. That is actually my floor. You are on a tripod and that is how my floor is. Everything's kind of like different angles, which I have mentioned in vlogs previously, and it is a real big pain, but fingers crossed we won't be here forever. Well, I hope we won't. Yeah, so for now, unfortunately, I'm sorry if it's annoying, but you're on a slant. There's nothing I can do about that. Also, if you hear any noises or anything like that, it will be Nelly. She's asleep next to me, and I'm hoping she stays asleep for the majority of this video. Otherwise, it could get quite interesting when she's trying to scratch me, hit me, scream. Like my chest at the minute, this is where she scratched me earlier. So yeah, she's a bit of a handful at the minute. I have written, I want to say notes, but it looks more like an essay because a lot went on. So I am obviously going to keep looking down. To be honest, I never thought I'd say this. I'd heard like other people say like you forget all about the pain, like when they're here, and all things like that. You don't, you don't think about it. And I was like, yeah, you're gonna remember that. That's like such a big life-changing thing. But cliche, and spoiler alert, you do actually forget. I've forgotten so many details. I was reading through this just before I started filming. I wrote this when I was about a week postpartum, I think. And I'm now, what am I as I film this? Nearly 6 weeks postpartum. And to be honest, I've forgotten so much of what went on. I remember certain bits that have stuck in my mind, and you'll understand more of that as I get into this video. But yeah, there's just so much that I completely forgot about. I'm reading through it all, I was just like, did that really happen? So yeah, I'm probably gonna read off of this a bit, which I know is probably a bit annoying, but it's all just a bit of a blur right now. So it's probably going to be a long video, as you know, I like to ramble. So grab yourself a cuppa and let's get into today's video. I just want to mention as well, she's snoring at the minute. It's so cute. She's so adorable, I can't stop staring at her. Okay, so let's start off at the very beginning. I obviously filmed a couple of vlogs leading up to my birth. One of which being my 39-week journey, hoping that Nelly was going to come naturally. And I did mention in that video, I believe, or the one before, that I was originally meant to be induced at 38 weeks. And then the consultant decided that I was alright to go to 40 weeks and that I would be induced on my due date, which was absolutely fine by me. I knew in my head I wanted to try and get this baby out. I really wanted a natural birth. I didn't want to go down the C-section route. I was adamant I didn't want an epidural or anything kind of going into my spine. I'd heard some horror stories, and from like people I'd spoken to, they had issues with their back after having injections into their spine and into their back and things like that. So I was really adamant that I didn't want anything like that. I just wanted it to be natural, and as natural as it could possibly be. However, I did have that understanding that whatever needed to happen, I would need to let happen. I wasn't gonna obviously put Nelly at risk, or myself at risk, and I would go with the guidance of what the hospital said, because they do this on a daily basis. They know whether you're kind of pushing your luck a bit. As I was saying, so in those vlogs, I basically tried every old wives' tale that I possibly could within the parameters of what I was allowed to do. So I couldn't have like the dates, the grapefruit juice and anything basically that I digested. I couldn't have any of that because obviously I had the gestational diabetes, so I had to be mindful of that, because although you would probably think, oh, you're near the end of your pregnancy, it's fine, just eat what you want, the end goal was after I gave birth, Nellie had to pass her blood sugar levels, and there's a tendency apparently that if you get higher readings in your pregnancy, especially in late pregnancy, when it comes to Nellie having her test after she's born, her blood sugar can drop dangerously low. So then that involves more treatment, more interventions and things like that, which obviously I didn't want for her. It was bad enough, as it turns out, some of the things that she had to go through in those first few days. But yeah, I just didn't want to put her at risk any more than she already was. Now, unfortunately, as again mentioned in that vlog, she didn't come naturally on her own, so I had to go to my induction date. So it got to induction day and I was given till 3 o'clock, where I would get a phone call at some point during that day. I just had to stay at home, try and relax, which is easier said than done when you're waiting for a phone call to go to hospital. I sent Ash to work because I said, well, there's no point in you sitting around here because he's just going to get aggy. You see, he's got no patience whatsoever. I'm like going to be up and down like a yo-yo because I'm not going to be able to settle to anything, because, you know, there's something major about to happen, and obviously we're both really excited to meet our baby girl. So I sent him to work and I just said, I'll phone you or message you when they phoned, because let's face it, they're not going to say like you need to be in within 10 minutes. They're going to give you time to get to the hospital. They knew where my address was as well, so they knew that I was further away from the hospital than perhaps other people, so they took all of that into consideration anyway. So I got up really early, or what felt like really early. It was like between 6 and 7, because the phone calls started to take place from 7:30 and I wanted a shower, so I needed to make sure I had my shower before that time, because obviously I didn't want to miss the phone call if I was in the shower. So I got up really early. I finished packing my hospital bag because, as you may know, I hadn't finished that, mainly because there was a lot of things that were like last minute stuff, like phone chargers, snacks, things like that. I wasn't going to put those in until the last minute, but I needn't have bothered rushing because the phone call didn't come through until 1 o'clock, and they said, can you come in at 6? So I was like, yeah, that's fine. So I messaged Ash, I said, just carry on with work, this is what they've said, blah blah blah. And then about an hour later I had another phone call saying something, you know, like a bed's come up, you can come in earlier, can you get in for 4? Well, Ash finishes work at 4 and I just thought to myself, I'm not ready. I had a little bit of a panic, despite the fact I obviously was ready and I could have gone in there and then and been absolutely fine, but I had a little momentary panic. And I also thought, well, in a nice way, Ash was then going to be on statutory paternity pay, which if you're in the UK you know is not very much whatsoever. So I kind of just thought, well, if he can do his whole shift and get paid for that whole shift rather than leaving early, then that's going to help us in the weeks that follow it with like paying rent and things like that. Obviously any money is good money. I said, I can't make it for 4 o'clock, I don't think I'll get there in time, but because I basically just said my other half's at work and he's not local, I said, but I could get there for closer to 5, and they said, yeah, that's fine. So I relayed that to Ash and we got ready to go as soon as he got back, and we headed up to the hospital for 5 o'clock. I was a little bit early, I think I got there at like 20 to 5, so it was somewhere between the two. One thing I would recommend if you are nearing the end of your pregnancy is to take a photo of you, your partner and your bump, and then like you and your bump, and maybe take a little video clip as well. It might seem excessive, but I actually love looking at that last memento of being pregnant, especially in those first few weeks. I really missed my bump, mainly like just holding on to it being there, like feeling Nelly move inside of me, just all those things I really missed. And I found that having those photos and videos of those last few moments kind of just, I won't say made up for it, but it just made it feel a bit more special. So I'd highly recommend doing that if you are close to your due date. So we arrived at the hospital and I checked in. I knew that once I walked through those hospital doors, I would not be allowed to leave again. I could walk somewhat around the grounds. The hospital that I'm at, you've got like the big main building, and then they've got like a, what do you call it, just like a covered over bit, which I think has got buildings cross top. I think it's like one of those almost like over the motorway service station type things. It looks a bit like that anyway, and I couldn't go past that, and I knew that. So I knew that once I was in, I was kind of in for the duration. The next time I would be out of there and going past that point would be with my baby girl, hopefully. So then I was shown my bay. Unfortunately, they didn't have any rooms. So I was on a ward with 4 other people and I had my little bay, but it did have the curtain that goes round, so I basically kept that round the whole time. I didn't want to be social. We were all going to be in different stages of induction, because obviously some of them had been in there earlier. There would be ones that would arrive after me, and I just didn't want to be sociable, to be fair. I just wanted to be in my little bubble with my family and just get on with things as best I can. Plus I didn't want to worry about what I looked like, and there's constantly like checks being done and things like that, so I just thought privacy was the best way forward. In the little section, I don't know what other hospitals are like, but I had obviously my bed and the table that goes over the bed. I had a little cupboard that I could put things in, but I didn't know, understandably, how long I would be in that bay, whether it would be a quick induction, whether it would be a slow induction. So I kind of didn't unpack. I just got things out of the bag as and when they needed, and then put them back in afterwards, and tried to keep it as tidy as possible, just so that when we did have to move, it wasn't a mad dash. And then there was also a chair that had a pull-out section that went into a bed so that Ash could stay with me, which I really, really appreciated. I was so worried going into hospital that I'd have to be there on my own. I don't do very well in hospitals at the best of times, even if it's just for an appointment, so the thought of like staying for however long really did fill me with dread. Shortly after arriving at the hospital and getting into my bay and everything, I pretty much just sat on the bed, and then a midwife came in to explain the whole process, definitely in depth. She kind of explained exactly what would be going on, just to put my mind at ease more than anything. And she went through the good and the bad and the ugly, I will say that, which I'm kind of grateful for. I don't know if every hospital does it, but she just said she wanted to be completely honest. These are the things that could happen. This is what we kind of want to happen, but there is a chance that this could happen, that kind of thing. So I kind of knew a little bit more about what to expect, what was good things and what was things that I'd need to flag if I felt a certain way, and just things like that. So I definitely feel like she put my mind at ease, and I was kind of feeling pretty excited by that point. Like, I was almost happy to be there. I wanted to get the process done and start the labour and give birth, and I just felt in a bit of a happy bubble, to be honest. Before I knew it, it was time for the induction step 1. I've got to get this right because I don't want to get it in the wrong order, because it now feels like a blur, like I said. So step 1 is the pessary, which was inserted, and I was told that it would be in for 24 hours, so I need to be careful that I didn't pull it out. It's basically, the only way I can describe it, obviously it's got hormone stuff on it, but it's basically like a big tampon that's got like a really long string, don't think the string was even taped. I think it was just left dangling, so you had to kind of be careful that it didn't pull out when you like wiped after the toilet or if you moved and things like that. And I was so worried that it was going to come out, because basically once it came out they couldn't put it back in, because obviously they couldn't put the same one back in, and they couldn't put another one in because they didn't know how much of the hormone had been absorbed by your body. So I was so scared of that, I'm not gonna lie, to the point that I barely moved off of the bed to start with. I barely went to the toilet, which is nothing unusual for me anyway. I'm always getting told off for not going to the toilet enough. But I did relax after a little while with it in, I will say that. But then I was put on the monitor for an hour to check that baby girl was happy with what was going on, that she wasn't stressed or anything, because she can be stressed apparently from the word go. And thankfully she was still happy, she wasn't stressed, and my stats were all fine, so it was good to carry on. So then we basically just passed the time, me and Ash just chatting away. We were probably annoying the people that were like around us in a nice way, but a lot of them were chatting as well, so it wasn't too bad. So yeah, we just like chatted about this and that, and it was all relaxed, and we were all like happy and chill and excited and everything. Yeah, that was pretty much all we did on that Monday evening, and then we settled down to sleep. I can't say sleep came easy. I'm really bad at sleeping in places that aren't my bed. We've even been going back down to Somerset to stay, and because it's now not classed as my bed, I struggled to switch off on that first night. The second night isn't too bad, although I have a newborn baby and, you know, sleep is not easy anyway, but I still struggle to just even switch off and relax if it's not my own bed. Added to that, obviously there was a ward full of people, because you had obviously the 3 other expectant mums and their partners as well. So yeah, it's not easy. You waking up? Oh, she's farting. Please go back to sleep. Yeah, it's just not easy to sleep in the slightest. Added to that, I had to have my blood pressure and temperature checked, and I also had to be put on the monitor so baby girl could be checked every 6 hours. So it kind of felt like I would just nod off and just get into a nice sleep, and then somebody would be there to wake me up, which was a bit of pain. Obviously I know why they were doing it, and I'm grateful they were doing it and whatnot. I'm not complaining at that side of it, but it was just on the sleep front, it was annoying, because it kind of felt like this was my last chance to actually get any sleep, and it was very, very much disturbed. So I would definitely say that if you're going to be induced, take some headphones or some earplugs or something so you can zone out and relax in a ward full of people, but also be prepared that they're going to wake you up all the time. And the trouble is as well, they were waking up the other people and you could hear things going on in the other bit, so it kind of disturbed you that way as well, which was annoying. But it then obviously was the early hours of Tuesday morning, and the midwife came in, and when she put me on the monitor she confirmed that what I was feeling was definitely contractions. I'd been getting them for a couple hours by that point, so when Ash woke up just after the midwife had gone and he was like, what's going on, and I could confirm that I was having contractions, the induction was working, and things were on their way. I was so happy and excited. I remember that feeling of like being all bubbly. It was just like the best feeling to know that the process had started, and before I knew it I would have my little girl in my arms. The little girl that's now staring at me. Who I'm willing to go back to sleep and who is not going to go back to sleep, I can tell. So I put her through the daytime. I managed to go for a walk on the hospital grounds. I kind of like pushed myself to get some fresh air, despite the fact I had this massive tampon in. You can't actually feel it, I will say that, like unless anybody else can. I didn't feel it. Once it was in, I kind of forgot it was there. It was just that constant reminder in the back of my head, don't pull that string out, that kind of was making me more cautious. Otherwise I probably wouldn't have even known it was there. I was still getting regular contractions all through that time, and they were getting strong enough that it would stop me from thinking, walking, talking, which is obviously a really good sign. And with each pain, I just kept breathing through it and telling myself it was one step closer to meeting baby girl. And obviously we were both just really excited to be able to meet her. So we just wanted to do whatever we could. I knew, like beforehand, I'd always said to myself that I would stay on my feet as much as I could, let gravity take some of the work, try and speed the process along that way. That's what my plan was. Things don't always go to plan, and unfortunately, unbeknown to me at the time, me and Ash actually had what we believe is COVID. A lot of family members that I'd been around in the last few days before I went into hospital unfortunately had contracted COVID from visiting somebody else in hospital. It was either from family members I got it, or it was from visiting somebody in hospital myself. So one of two ways we think we ended up contracting it. It was definitely COVID. I didn't need no test to tell me that. I've had it before and it was horrendous this time round, because yeah, I was in labour and it wasn't pleasant, I can tell you. But before I knew it, it was time for the pessary to be taken out. It was very painless and pretty much the same as when it went in. It just kind of like pop, there we go, it's in. Like there was no issue on that front. It came out the same as a tampon, to be honest. I had that little bit of a, I don't know what you call it, I guess like a dry sensation down there as it was coming out. It's the same sensation as if you've had a tampon in and you've forgotten about it and accidentally gone for a wee, which I did many years ago, and you just get that dry feeling. It just feels a bit like something's brushing as it comes out. Like I'd say at most it was that, and afterwards I just felt dry is the only way I could describe it. So then once that was taken out, I had to have an internal examination, because obviously they need to keep track of what my cervix is doing, and this is where it kind of falls apart slightly, and I feel like this was the downfall of it. I don't want to like say that it's a horror story, because it's not. I wouldn't say that it was anywhere near as bad as what a lot of people have had, but it is my experience and I want to be completely honest with it. The midwife that came to do my internal examination, all I can say, she was a very nice lady, don't get me wrong, she was very nice, but all I can say is she had massive hands, absolutely massive hands. Yeah, that's all I can really remember about her that much. She also didn't use very much lube to do the internal examination, and I know that now because of what happened afterwards, but basically it was excruciating pain. She couldn't find my cervix whatsoever, and she was rooting around with this massive hand. I was getting contractions at the same time. I was feeling a bit fluey by this point as well, obviously the COVID, and it just wasn't a pleasant experience. And even when she pulled her like fingers out, it really hurt. And obviously I'd already said that I was dry anyway, and she knew that I'd be dry because that is what the pessary does. So yeah, it just wasn't a pleasant experience, to the point I literally thought I was going to pass out. Like the pain was that bad. I'm usually quite good with pain, but this pain was a whole nother level. So then she went and got a second midwife, like a more experienced midwife, who was lovely, much smaller hands. But she explained to myself and the midwife that she was just going to put on lots and lots of lube on her hat, like on her glove, and in me as well, because I would be dry from the pessary, which that is the point where I knew that the first midwife definitely hadn't used enough lube, and she kind of looked a bit guilty as well. I don't know how experienced she was. She wasn't a trainee, she was qualified, but yeah, I think she kind of failed to remember that you need to put a lot more lube in. Anyway, she found my cervix and she said that I was cleared to go to part 2, which is a gel. Now the gel, It was a little uncomfortable, bordering on painful, but I don't know if that's because of the damage that that first midwife had done, because this all happened within 10 minutes of itself. So I was still kind of reeling from the pain of what the first midwife had done before really recovering enough to have the gel put in. It was just kind of all in one go. So just because I found it uncomfortable and a little bit painful doesn't mean that someone else will. That just might be the circumstances I found myself under. And then, like before, I was hooked back up to the monitor, and I was told that it would be 6 hours from the gel being put in to hopefully step 3 taking place if need be. They were kind of hoping that I wouldn't need step 3 because I'd been progressing in the right way. So it was just a case of sitting it out and keeping my fingers crossed. In that time, those 6 hours, I think it was probably only maybe a couple hours in, the contractions were coming thick and fast. There wasn't really any let up in them, and I actually started to feel really, really poorly. I think that was mainly down to the COVID, but I think that mixed in with the contractions, etc., and I just wasn't coping. Like, I will openly admit I wasn't coping. Yeah, I just wasn't coping. I felt really faint. I was boiling hot. I remember being like drenched in sweat. I was still hooked up to the monitor at this point. And I remember vaguely Ash asking me if I was alright, and I just couldn't respond. Like, I couldn't work out how to talk. I felt really out of it. I think at one point I did pass out, which was not fun, but obviously I was on a bed, so it wasn't going to do any damage in that sense. And the monitors are actually shown through to their like hub area on the computer. So all of a sudden everybody came rushing in, and I remember vaguely being asked, do I feel ill? And I said yes. Next thing I know, I had like temperature being taken. They said that was really high. There was a mention that I needed to go onto labour ward, not necessarily because of labour, but they needed me to have one-on-one care. They couldn't have me on a ward. They needed somebody basically to be on call just for me, which started to scare me a little bit. And then they said that I would probably need a antibiotic drip type thing because there was something obviously wrong. And I still felt in pain from that first midwife's examination. Yeah, I felt like everything was too hot, everything was clammy, like it just wasn't pleasant. I don't know if that maybe is a normal induction. I doubt it, because the way I was rushed through to labour ward, considering they said that they didn't have any beds for the woman that was opposite me, that was ready to go to labour ward. I was on labour ward within 10 minutes. So to me that says that there was something that they were really concerned about, which was very, very scary, I'm not gonna lie. Especially because I wasn't really with it enough to ask, were they concerned? Like, I didn't feel with it enough to ask any of those questions. Ash was really poorly himself, and we were just trying to battle through it as best we could, because I didn't want him not to be at the birth. That was the thing. He could have obviously gone home and rested, but because the contractions were coming through so thick and fast, I didn't want him not to be there, especially when it's his first child. As soon as I got into the labour ward, they reiterated that I would need a antibiotic drip, because I clearly wasn't very well. And so the midwife that was looking after me set about putting in a cannula, which was an experience in itself. Getting blood out of me is never very good in the first place anyway. Like, my body does not like giving blood at all. So I knew it wasn't going to be easy for her to get the cannula in, and sure enough, she put it into my vein, and within 10 seconds my vein collapsed and nothing would come out of it. So she had to try somewhere else, and then somewhere else, and then it was third time lucky. She finally managed to get the cannula in to get the bloods taken that I needed for them to do some tests, and obviously then it was there for whatever I needed. I then had to wait about an hour because it was shift changeover time, and this is something that I know understandably obviously it has to happen. People have to go home, they've got lives to lead, new shifts come in and things, but I kind of felt like because of my induction time, obviously like I had to wait the 24 hours to start with, and then it was like the 6 hours, so then by the time that had taken place, it was as if everything that needed to be done to me was done right on shift change, which was a bit of a pain in the ass, to be honest, because I just felt like I was waiting extra long time a lot of the time. That's how stroppy she gets in her sleep. So I just kind of felt like it was constantly, I was being pushed to the side because obviously shift change, and then they'd do other things first, so then it was like getting pushed later and later, and I just, yeah, like I know they can't help it, it was just a bit annoying because I kind of wanted to get on with it, especially because I was getting these contractions anyway, so the sooner they got on with things, the sooner things would progress more, if that makes sense. The new midwife introduced herself eventually, and she was really, really lovely actually, and out of all of them I'd probably say she was one of the ones that I got on with the best, if not the best. Like I had a good chat with her as well. She like put me at ease. We were just talking about like normal stuff as well, whereas a lot of the other midwives hadn't really chatted to me just in generic terms. It was all like medical and then they were out the door, whereas with other people they'd all spoken about generic things as well. So I kind of felt a bit, it sounds really petty, but I felt a bit like not included in a sense, because if it wasn't, oh we're coming to check this or we're coming to do this, like I didn't see anyone, whereas the same midwives were going around to the other people and just having a chat, you all right, how you doing, like all things like that. Like I never got those questions asked, and I did raise that with Ash, and he said he'd noticed as well that I seemingly was treated differently to the other 3 people that were on that bay. So it was nice to kind of just actually have a conversation with someone, because obviously I've been talking to Ash was there like and everything, but there's only so much you can talk about, so it was just nice for this newer midwife to talk about generic things. You know, she talked about the traffic to get into work, and we talked about like where I live and things like that. It was just, it was pleasant, you know. And then she basically, after introducing herself, said that the doctor will be in shortly to start step 3. So she was like, let's get you prepped, and then like you can just come in, sort it out, blah blah blah. But at no point did I receive those antibiotics that was mentioned that I needed. That just, it didn't happen, whether they thought one had done it and the other. This is the other thing I think with the shift change. I think possibly the first midwife was probably meant to have given me those antibiotics and didn't, because she went off to get authorization and never came back. So I don't know if they thought she'd done it and vice versa, but it didn't happen. However, the doctor came in to start step 3, which is to insert like a balloon type thing, and then basically fill it with water. I was told that it wouldn't hurt. However, personally I found it absolutely excruciating. I was screaming out. Anyone would have thought I was actually giving birth at that point. It was so painful. But again, I don't know if that was because of the internal examination that I'd had, because it felt like that first woman did do damage. Like I even said it to Ash, I was like, I feel like she's either torn something, or like something didn't feel right and didn't feel the same as what it had done before she did it. But I don't know if it was just that it was like internally bruised, or like, I don't know, but all I do know is it was really painful. Maybe my body just can't handle that type of pain. Maybe I'm good at other types of pain, but just not internal pain, maybe, who knows. The other thing I did think about afterwards is I hadn't been to the toilet for a long time, because obviously I'd been poorly down at the bay, and I passed out and I was delirious, and then I was constantly hooked up to machines, so I hadn't actually emptied my bladder. And in hindsight, I wonder if that was part of the problem for it being really painful. I don't know, I'm not, you know, I'm not medically trained or anything like that, and maybe someone can tell me, who knows. But I just feel like maybe with an absolutely full to bursting bladder, whether everything was just pushed and it didn't work. I feel like maybe they should have said, do you want to empty your bladder? Or maybe I should have just thought about emptying my bladder, who knows. But I didn't know what to expect, and in hindsight I wish I had emptied my bladder before they started step 3, because I do think possibly it wouldn't have been as painful. But either way, some of the fluid had to be drained back out. I couldn't take all of the fluid in, which I could see it on the doctor's face. He was kind of looking like, this ain't gonna work, but he had to go through the process anyway. But yeah, I kind of resigned myself. I had a gut feeling that the balloon wasn't going to work, and sure enough, from probably like an hour after the balloon was inserted, the contraction stopped, and nothing, like, I knew nothing was happening. I could tell it just come to a standstill, I guess. As some of the fluid was being drained, I started to feel really funny. Like, I think again it was a pain. I'm very much a person that if it's excruciating pain, I am liable to throw up. I'm just that type of person. If I get a headache, I throw up. If I'm in like really bad pain with anything, I'll just throw up. And I knew I was getting that sensation, and I remember going from screaming because I was in pain to the liquid slowly being removed slightly, with the pain like semi-subsiding, to then me literally shouting out, I think I'm going to be sick. To which Ash grabbed a sick bowl, thrust it in my face, and then he went to put his hand on my forehead to move my hair out the way, you know, in a very caring way, and next thing I know, he's on the floor, passed out. Now obviously he was really poorly as well. I could tell he had a temperature. I knew he wasn't right because whilst we were waiting, he fell asleep on the window ledge, like literally curled up on the window ledge. The midwife could see he wasn't very well either, but knew that like I really wanted him to be with me. And yeah, he just literally passed out. He was probably about this close to knocking his head on like the metal feet of the baby crib, so he's really lucky that he didn't do that, but he did smash his head against the floor, and I could hear it like hit the floor. Like, he went down like a sack of spuds. So obviously I was then abandoned, which was fine. Like, it didn't matter. All I was concerned about then was him. So they abandoned me, pressed the emergency button. Pretty much what felt like the whole staff, which probably was, to be fair, came running in. They had like, they hooked him up to the blood pressure monitor. They like put something under his head and they slowly got him up, etc. They did say to him he needed to go to A&E, but he refused. He wasn't leaving me. He said that he felt fine to them, but to me afterwards he said that he had a really major headache. So obviously I was stressing over that, but he was adamant he wasn't leaving me. And yeah, so we just kind of had to get through it. He basically had a hangover for the next like 3 days. In hindsight, I really wish he had gone and got checked out. Thankfully he's been fine, but yeah, it was definitely a scary 10 minutes. And when they did his blood pressure, it was like super low, so it was clear that it wasn't just him fainting because of a procedure that was happening. Like, this was, you are really poorly. So then going back to me, because it's all about me. No, I'm joking. I then had to wait 24 hours with this balloon in the hope that it would break my waters. Like they were hoping that where it's filled up it would just like slowly move down and then my waters should break within the 24 hours. So I was then moved back into the ward area that I was in before for like the inductions and things. It was deemed that whatever infection I had broken. I still felt really rough, I'm not gonna lie, but nowhere near as rough as what I had felt. So that makes me think that maybe it was a mixture of having the contractions at the same time. My body was probably just like, I can't cope with this is too much. But this time thankfully we were given a private room. I think probably to kind of ward off spreading the infection as much as possible, although everyone that had already been on that previous bay with me were already ill anyway. Like the amount of coughing and spluttering, like half the midwives had been ill from the moment I got there, so I knew it wasn't necessarily me spreading anything. I think there was just a lot of us that were poorly. It was just that time of year as well, to be fair. So we had a private room and it had its own bathroom and everything, which was lovely. In hindsight, I wish I'd had a shower. I'm not gonna lie, I do wish I had had a shower, but I didn't. Yeah, I still felt really rotten, so we watched a little couple of programs on iPlayer, like I caught up with EastEnders, you know, I'm not gonna miss that for the world. And we watched, what else did we watch? The David, Jason and Jay Blades like Fix It type show. I can't even think what it was called. We watched a couple episodes of that because it had been filmed. We'd watched it be filmed at one of the air shows, so we wanted to watch it. I still haven't finished the series, but I wanted to watch it and see if you could see me like nosing in the background. But the episodes we watched, I didn't see me, but I know there's like 2 more episodes I think where I might be in it, so who knows. No one said they see me, so I'm hoping I'm not doing something stupid if you do see me. So yeah, we just watched that for like the remainder of the time. I had the 6 hourly checks again, and in between that I was just sleeping basically. That was kind of all I could do. So then it's Wednesday and it's about 2 AM in the morning at the time that the balloon could come out. I think that was the annoying thing for me, was every procedure that had to be done was somewhere between 1 and 3 AM. It couldn't just have been done at a normal time. Everything was late, you know? As like we had all guessed, the balloon wasn't going to work, and it didn't. My waters were still intact, so I needed to have another internal examination, which, as you can imagine, I was absolutely petrified of. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I didn't like run out of there and say no, it's not happening. I really don't. But the lady was really lovely. She took it slowly. She, like I'd already explained about the other one anyway, so she knew that, and she took it slowly and gently. It was still obviously uncomfortable and a little bit painful, but nowhere near as bad as that first one, thank God. And after all that effort of having the different induction things, I was only 1 centimetre dilated, and it needed me to get to 3 centimetres ideally for them to be able to pop my waters, and it just wasn't progressing. I think probably in hindsight, if the balloon had had the full capacity, like if I'd have emptied my bladder and probably emptied my bowels as well, as gruesome as that is, I hadn't actually emptied my bowels since I'd been in the hospital. And like bearing in mind, like we're now on Wednesday and I went in on the Monday, like I didn't even go on, the last time I think I went before that was the Saturday, so like there was a lot going on in there, combined with having this big baby in there as well, and not a lot of room. I know I was quite big by that point, but I was very squashed, and yeah, I think that just added all up to how painful it was. And I think if I'd have had the full thing, then the full like balloon, then potentially yes, like I would have had my waters popped, or they would have gone by themselves, one or the other. I do think that is the case, but it just didn't happen like that. So we had to go to plan B. Plan B was a C-section, which obviously, as mentioned at the start of this video, I really didn't want, but by this point I was literally just like, give me a C-section. Like I was tired, my body was exhausted, I was still feeling really poorly. It was time, And I think I knew that straight away. I was just like, do you know what, we've tried, you know, like I tried to go down the natural route, and this time it just didn't happen. It's not to say that any future pregnancies it wouldn't happen, but just on this occasion it wasn't to be. She did also say that my cervix was, the opening to my cervix was really far back. So what had happened was, say the opening of the cervix is there, baby's head, instead of being on the opening putting pressure, it had actually slipped forward. So it was going to be questionable whether baby could slip their head back enough to even get to the cervix. So that was another thing. I was just like, that'll probably stress her out, or like it's just going to prolong it. So C-section is the only way I could really go. So the midwife basically said that she would let the consultants and the doctors know, and that if I eat something now and then after that just have sips of water, nothing else, so that then I could be put straight on the list for a C-section in the morning. So then about 7 AM a consultant came in, just because he had to verbally ask me and I had to verbally tell him that I wanted a C-section, rather than it just being relayed through the midwives. So I did say that. He did offer to try and break my waters, although he said he probably won't be successful. He was willing to try it with me, and I basically said, no, I'm too tired, like I want that C-section now. So he accepted that and off he went. And then about 10 minutes later, a nurse came in with some scrubs for Ash, and she put on compression socks for me. And I kind of thought like, right, we're really doing this, you know. And then it was just a waiting game until they had space for me on the labour ward. We were waiting for quite a while, I'm not going to lie, and my obs were taken every 2 hours. Yeah, so the obs included like temperature, blood pressure, being hooked up to the monitor, like the pulse being done and everything. But it also, by this point, obviously included my blood sugar levels, because having the gestational diabetes, they needed to keep a check on that as well, because obviously by this point I'm nil by mouth. So I was also given an anti-acid tablet to stop me feeling so ill because I wasn't eating, which I must say worked, and I kind of wish that you were allowed to have them when you have the fasting test, because I think that would probably have helped me greatly, but never mind. And then this just went on until 2 PM. I went up to get, or I got up to go to the toilet, went to the toilet, and as I was coming back through, because you had like our room, and then you had like the bathroom was here, and then you had like an extra sink, which obviously is where the midwives would wash their hands before like examining you and stuff. And as I came back through the bathroom door, I literally had to hang on to the sink, and Ash was like, "You're all right?" I was like, "I feel really lightheaded. I feel like I could literally, if I let go of this, I'm going to be on the floor." So he helped me back into bed, and he was like, "Press your buzzer, you need to tell them." And me being the stubborn me, I didn't want to bother anybody, but at the same time I knew that my obs were due pretty much imminently, because they were like 10-15 minutes late. So when they came in, they asked each time, "How are you feeling?" I was like, I've just been to the bathroom, but like I had to have help coming back because I just felt really faint. And they were like, "Right, okay." And all of a sudden it was like action stations, and they checked my blood sugar, and it was deemed too low. It was like in the 3s. So if it had been like my home machine, then I would have been in the blue. So straight away they were like, "Right, we need to phone, we need to get this sorted." So because of that low blood sugar reading, and the fact that I'm Rhesus negative as well, meant that I was suddenly high priority. I had jumped quite a way up the list, which I'm not heartbroken about. Yeah, it definitely sped things up a lot quicker. They got on the phone to the consultant, and I'd say within about 20 minutes somebody was whisked out of the labour ward because I saw them come down with their newborn baby, and literally about 10 minutes later I was whisked straight up there. They did the checks again because by this point they needed to keep checks on me every like 40 minutes because I was now high risk, and it was still low, so they ended up giving me 3 glucose tablets, which I must say were really, really tasty. If I knew what the brand was of them, I would literally be having them daily. They were so, so tasty. And thankfully that brought my blood sugars to classed as within normal range, but it was still low. It was still like 4.2, something like that. So there was a danger that it would slip those 0.3 and I would be back in the blue. So they still had to really monitor me anyway. And then the consultant came in, which was the consultant that I said I didn't like. But the consultant came in and it explained all the like risks and explained exactly what was going to happen. And then I had to like forms to sign, etc., to say that I understood what I was undertaking basically. And then he said that he was going to go off now, but that an anaesthetist would come in to explain their kind of like risks and things like that, and what happens with them, and that yeah, then we would be good to go for the C-section once that had all been signed off. So yeah, it felt really, really exciting. I felt like we were finally like at that last hurdle, and we were both like buzzing by that point. So by the time the talks had happened, I'd say this is about 3 o'clock, and the anaesthetist had said I would probably go down about 4ish, because somebody was already in surgery at the time. So by the time they'd come out and they'd like cleaned and everything, they said it would probably be about 4 o'clock, and I was like, no, that's fine. Like, you know, I was clock watching by that point anyway. I just wanted it done. And then my midwife came in and said she had bad news for me. Now I thought originally that she was going to turn around and say like, you can't have the surgery or something like that, because obviously I had this infection. I still had it. I still felt rough, and I had a temperature, and I was worried that they were going to turn around and say you can't have the surgery. I didn't know if that was an option or not, whether they would, you know, if it was a factor that they would say we're not doing it right now. And I was also really terrified as well that they would say that Ash couldn't go in because he had an infection. But it turned out the bad news was that there was an emergency that was deemed higher priority than me, so it would push me back, which, to be honest, she came in really worried, thinking like I was going to burst into tears or something, and I just breathed a sigh of relief in a nice way that it wasn't what I'd been thinking. And I was like, no, that's fine. Like, to me, it didn't bother me in that sense, because I'd rather a mother and a child be saved and me just pushed back a bit. Like, it really didn't bother me in the grand scheme of things. Like, I was still going to get to meet my baby. Yes, I was high risk, but I didn't have the complications of, like, Nellie wasn't stressed, because I know when I was born I was stressed, so I knew that as long as that wasn't the case, then I was happy to wait. So that was that, and then that surgery took ages because I was right by the theatre door, so I could hear when they were going in and out, and that one took ages. And then I think there was another, I want to say there was another emergency after that, which again I was happy for him to sort out, but by that point I was like, I just want to meet my baby, you know. It was like I've come so close, and yet that last little bit is just being held off. So it was a double-edged sword kind of thing, but I wasn't like begrudging these women the theatre before me, if that makes sense. As with most of my stay, it was a shift change over time, so I had to wait for the shift to change, which I'm kind of glad about in a way. Nothing against the anaesthetist that had come in, but I just found that the woman that took over was hilarious, and I don't know if I would have had quite the same experience with the previous one, if that makes sense. like, I really gelled with the woman. She was really, really funny. And yeah, I think it just made it a bit better. So I think kind of that worked in my favour, even though I didn't realise it at the time. So then at 6 p.m, finally, after like me saying at 7 a.m. that yes, I wanted a C-section to the consultant, at 6 p.m. it was finally my turn, which I was so happy about. I'm not gonna lie. One of the weird things I found is that despite I was about to have this major surgery that I kind of hadn't planned for, I'd kind of wanted to resist it as much as possible. But strangely, I wasn't nervous, which was, looking back, was really weird, because I'm nervous about the best of things. I was so nervous about actually going into hospital in the first place. But for the C-section, I wasn't nervous at all. I didn't feel anything other than just this pure excitement that I was finally going to get to meet my baby girl. And that was all I wanted. I couldn't care about anything else. I just wanted to hold her in my arms and start this journey as a family, kind of thing.